Welcome to 1 Week, 1 Year. It's a podcast where we go through a year of film history each week. And I am your host, Chris Ellie. I'm a film projectionist and a film fan. And then I'm joined by your other host.
I am Glenn Covell. I am a filmmaker and film fan.
Yeah, and I assume that you listened to the first episode, but if you haven't, because you just know that the films of 1896 are so much better than the films of 1895, we're just here to look at all of film history in its proper context and go through the entire historical catalog of film from the beginning until now. In order. And it's going to take a long time. Glenn, would you like to start us off with the news of the year?
The news of the year, 1896. Utah becomes the 45th state out of the Union. The X-ray machine is invented. The Klondike Gold Rush begins. La Boheme premieres. The first gay magazine is released in Germany and ran until 1933, until its presses were destroyed by Adolf Hitler. The first modern Olympics begins in Athens. A giant tornado sweeps through St. Louis, causing millions of dollars in damage, adjusted for inflation. Henry Ford builds his first vehicle, the Ford Quadricycle. The first French-speaking Canadian Prime Minister is elected. The Philippine Revolution begins, and the St. Augustine monster is discovered on the coast of Florida. Originally named Octoctopus giganteus, it was later discovered to be a gelatinous blob of whale flesh.
Thank you, Glenn, for reading us the news.
A lot of news that year.
Yeah. You know, a lot of news every year, and that's why we're doing this. The depth, not the breadth, the depth.
Indeed.
So kind of where we left off last week, right at the end of 1895 was when this Lumiere, Lumiere presentation happened in December 1895, 1895.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that just kicked off an enormous amount of filmmaking all around the world, from the Lumieres and from others.
Yeah, it really kind of started as like a bit of a booming business or a booming just thing that people were interested in, I guess. Mm-hmm. I did read up on it and saw that the Lumieres started to hire and work with a lot more camera operators that they kind of sent around the world to different places to make more films.
It seems like kind of the genesis of the travelogue in that way.
Yeah. I feel like my thought watching the Lumire Brothers films from this year was they took them out of the backyard and into the streets.
Ooh, mean streets.
The mean streets of Lyon, France, and abroad.
Yeah, I mean, I put down a small list of a couple of the actualities that I think mostly Lumiere that I saw from different places. Like there was some on Broadway in New York City, Venice, London, Mexico, Geneva, and Moscow.
Yeah.
So going all over the place.
Yeah. And it's like the people who worked in the Lumiere factory, possibly who were in the film we watched last week.
Oh yeah.
Of the workers leading the Lumiere factory. There's one guy, Charles Moisson, I think is how his name is said. Should have looked it up, but oh well. He was a mechanic at their factory and helped develop the cinematograph, their sort of film projector camera lab hybrid.
Yeah.
And became kind of one of their traveling cameramen.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
There's another guy, Jean-Louis Promio, who saw the 1895 show, the exhibition, and kind of joined the team and helped train other cinematograph operators and traveled all over the world.
Wow. That's interesting because as we'll get to later, it seems that the Lumieres were a little standoffish at that exhibition. All these people trying to buy their cameras and them just for like 10,000 francs or 50,000 francs. And they just said no.
Yeah.
Or wait, how do you say no in French?
No.
No.
You really say it the same way, but with a much heavier accent.
Yeah, Yeah, so actualities from around the world, but probably their most famous actuality from this time.
Which is also, I think, one of the earliest from the year also.
Hold on, my dog just walked in.
Oh,
I thought I closed the door. Lucy, come on.
This has to stay in. This is too good to cut out. This is important podcasting that the listeners want to hear.
So professional.
Can't cut that out.
Yeah, I'll cut it out. Oh, I can cut it out. Watch me. So their most famous, right? Their most famous movie that the Lumières did, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would hazard the most famous film before Trip to the Moon in 1902.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, is Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat Station, or Glenn. Mr. I thought you looked this up.
I know, I don't have it in front of me. Hang on. Or Arrivée d'un train à la Ciotat.
So, Arrival of a Train at the Station, which you have likely seen before, unlike a lot of these. Unlike a lot of these, is a stationary camera that is set up at like right along the edge of a train track, and you're seeing all these people waiting for the train to arrive, and then the train kind of comes in at this diagonal angle along the screen, and then fills up most of the left side of the frame, and people get on the train, and then the film ends. It's about 45 seconds long. But this is the movie that has the story that you may have heard, which is probably not true, that that the audience upon first seeing this thought that the train was going to hit them, and so screamed and ran from the theater.
Yeah, which pretty much every article or blurb that I've read about this film says that is almost 100% not true. They're like, no, people weren't that dumb. Like they understood what they were seeing was sort of light projected onto a screen, and that sort of thing, even if film, like moving pictures, weren't really a known form of entertainment then.
Yeah,
that there were magic lantern shows and there were sort of theatrical projections and things like that they were probably familiar with.
And also, I imagine they kind of went to go and see this under the pretense that they were going to see a motion picture and not a real train that was going to hit them.
Unless it was a sort of King Kong situation where they didn't know what they were going to see.
Is that what happens in King Kong? It was like mysterious until they open the...
I mean,
we'll get to King Kong.
we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But it is funny that is kind of like the thing that it is probably most well known for is that story, which is probably untrue.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a neat little film. If we're looking at it from the context of a lot of this early cinematography, I think the shot is really dynamic. It's
yeah.
I think I saw it described somewhere as like, you know, even though it's one single shot with no edits, it kind of forms a wide, a medium, and a close up in composition as the train gets closer and closer to the screen. And we are seeing more kind of deliberate framing in these movies coming up.
It feels very deliberate that they filmed it that way.
Yeah, it's a cool shot.
Yeah. A lot of their films from this year were similar to that, where they felt very deliberate and were just very cool shots.
Yeah. Well, before we get onto that, did you see that like 4K 60 frames per second version of Arrival of a Train that was floating around on the internet? It's disgusting and I hate it.
I think it's cool. Like, I would never describe it as better, but it's an interesting kind of experiment to try to.
Yeah. I guess I'm being a little too reactionary there, but it was using these like neural net algorithms to fill in, to interpolate, I guess, the extra frames and to do some kind of like hokey upres to 4K. But I looked it up, or when I was looking in the video, I was looking in the comments, and the guy who posted it said, all the credit goes to the algorithm makers, people like Waifu2X and so and that just made me go like, okay, I don't need to take this thing seriously. I don't know if you saw this as well, but like there were some more kind of Lumiere upresing modern, quote unquote, modernization efforts on YouTube that have been happening recently with neural networks. There was like a compilation of all these like baby films that they shot, just actualities of little babies doing their things. And it was also, it had all of those neural net algorithms. I think it might have used some slightly different ones than Arrival of a Train did. And it also had like a neural net colorization, and it like the colorization was like pulsing because it wasn't actually latching on to real objects. And it was almost like sickening to watch, actually. Oh yeah. But speaking of the framing, did you read about how they were thinking that Arrival of a Train might have been the kind of dynamism of that, and some of the early Lumieres came from early experiments with 3D that they were doing?
Oh yeah, I did. I saw something about that. I don't remember. I didn't really read more into it.
Well, I thought this was really interesting because if you're making cinema from scratch, right? Like, what's to stop it from being 3D, right? Maybe the most natural thing to do. The whole idea of having moving pictures on a screen was so novel. Probably the first idea of what it would be 3D. And so what I read was that they were experimenting with 3D before they even shot any of their stuff. But, at 2D black and white was kind of the most natural way of going about things. And they remade Lumiere, or the Lumieres remade it in 3D like 35 years later, Arrival of the Train at the Station.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's like a 3D version floating around somewhere.
Yeah, I gotta find that and find some way of watching it, since I don't have a 3D TV. I did think it was interesting. I think there are a lot of other train films that they did.
Yeah, like Arrival of a Train at different stations.
Yeah, they became a whole series.
And I got one more thing on Arrival of a Train. Is that, considering how famous and well known and kind of foundational it is, I believe, the first or one of the first films that has been encoded into DNA.
Wow!
You remember on Important If True, they were talking about like injecting GIFs and computer viruses into human DNA, or just regular synthesized DNA, and that is using DNA as like a data storage method.
Yeah, so then you can be a DNA hacker.
Yeah. Important If True, amazing podcast. I think it's both of our favorite podcasts.
Shout out to a different podcast that is no longer releasing new episodes.
Sad. But apparently this movie was encoded into DNA and then later decrypted using a DNA sequencer and put back together again. That's
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
This film was in somebody's blood, or their
I don't think it was in somebody's blood, but it was in a little piece of cell material in a test tube. But yeah,
that some extremist stole it and injected it into themselves, and then became a train.
Exactly, yeah, someone who wants to become a train. Do you have anything to say about some other Lumiere movies?
Yeah, there were some interesting ones. There was Launch of a Ship, I think is the English title. The French title is Lancement d'un navire. I'm probably butchering that, but sue me. Which is a wide shot of a train being launched off of
a ship being launched.
Yeah, a ship being launched off of a dry dock, and there's crowd of people in the foreground, very small at the bottom of the frame, and the entire rest of the frame is taken up by this giant ship moving past the camera until it completely passes by, and you see the city and the other crowd of people on either side.
It's a really like monstrous looking ship. Like the shot is striking in how huge the thing that you're looking at is.
It really gives a very good sense of scale.
Yeah.
It's just a great shot. I feel like I would love to steal it for something.
Well, this is copyright free, so you literally can.
Yeah. But yeah, that I think sort of like ties into what we were saying about how the Lumiere films are really being very deliberate about their shot placement and are really kind of experimenting with the frame a bit more. I'm just trying to create really striking, cool looking images.
Yeah. I saw another one. I have no idea how to pronounce this. Quai de l'Archevêché Lyon. And it's unknown. Apparently it's who made it or how or whatever is completely unknown. It's just this old film that's from 1896. And it's fairly unremarkable, but there's like a flooded street and there's some carriages that are kind of just going through the water that's maybe like a foot tall or something like that. And there's probably like 100 people on the sidewalk kind of watching this whole operation happen because in 1896 you didn't have anything more interesting to do.
Watch carriages go through puddles.
Yeah. But it's a pretty not remarked upon film from this time. But I thought that like the color or I guess the use of like the black and white contrast in that one, it was like really deep, and it was another kind of deep focus sort of dynamic shot of things coming toward the camera, which I guess is my favorite of all of these kinds of things. And it's another French one that is just some real choice shot composition and
I mean you can see like the carriage reflected in the water, which is kind of interesting. Another one that was a Lumiere, or wasn't shot by the Lumire Brothers, but was shot by one of their sort of one of their cohorts, one of their minions. Gabriel Veyer, I'm guessing. Were shot in Mexico, and is Duel au pistolet, or pistol duel, and it's just sort of another deep focus shot of two guys holding up pistols and firing, and then the crowd sort of rushing into the guy who gets shot. Initially watching this, I wasn't sure if it was staged or if it was an actual pistol duel.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
because it looks so
real.
old. It does. It's very convincing. If I had read that it was real, I would have believed it.
Yeah, I mean, a step up from the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, certainly. As far as faked deaths on film.
Yeah, although it did stick out to me as this is probably the first gunfight on film. Or the first like guns on film, which seems significant since I feel like film and guns are kind of linked. It's one of those things, along with horses and trains, that have kind of always seemed to have been subjects of film.
Yeah, like I was looking at a lot of the subject matter of these films that we have been watching, and this is something that has been kind of remarked upon before, but it's interesting seeing that violence and sex are things that are baked into the founding of cinema. I
mean, naturally, those are the two things that people want to see.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I mean, they're two things that you typically don't just see out in the world walking around.
So you go into a picture house or look into a little cubby.
They're very, I don't know, they're very kind of like...
They're sensational. There's something... Yeah,
exactly. Another one that was not shot by the Lumieres, but by one of their cameramen, is Panorama of the Grand Canal, Venice, which I think is the first moving shot where the camera is moving.
Yeah. It's a dolly, but on a boat.
Yeah, it's just camera stuck on a boat going down a canal in Venice. But it just seems significant because it's the first time that the camera is actually moving.
Yeah, it's cool to see Venice back in that day. It's something that looks, I don't know, it seems like it looks pretty different now. So watching a lot of these Lumiere actualities that have been shot all around the world, it was interesting to me how so many people are wearing the same kinds of clothes. You know, these aren't people that are being put in front of a camera to wear a uniform. Like, it's just everybody had the same kinds of clothes that they wore back in 1896. But it was like slightly different of the same kinds of clothes in Moscow or Mexico or New York City. So just, seeing these old societies was very neat, including Venice.
They're definitely kind of cool little snapshots into the past and into different parts of the world at this time also.
Yeah.
I don't think it's sad about it. Cover it for the Lumiere stuff. There's demolition of a wall.
Which is some early effects, kind of.
Yeah.
It's some Lumiere workers knocking down the wall of a partially destroyed building, and they're just hacking away at it with pickaxes and trying to push it over. And then the wall, they reverse the film, and the wall just puts itself back together and goes back up, which is the first time that's ever been done. And Lumiere is playing with some kind of funky camera effects for the first time.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like they did that for any particular reason other than to kind of because they could. I think they were just like, neat, check it out. you made it go back.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of people advancing the cinema,
segue.
Yeah, right. Speaking of people advancing cinema effects and the camera as an art form, we can move on to Georges Méliès.
Yes.
Who
famous Georges Méliès,
who's the real MVP of 1896.
Oh, for sure.
And we definitely buried the lead by by talking about him later in the podcast.
Yeah. Oh no, this is where all the good stuff is.
Yeah.
For sure. Georges Méliès is probably best known for directing A Trip to the Moon, which doesn't
7 years later.
Yeah. But he started as a magician, if you couldn't tell by any of his films. And I do think that really kind of informs his outlook on film and sort of like the way he viewed it as kind of an extension of being a magician.
Yeah, I mean, he invented
tricks,
movie magic.
Illusions. Yeah, pretty much.
He took so much of a different approach than everyone that we have seen here. He's inventing new funky effects. He's like stopping the camera and swapping things out and making it seem like things just pop into existence. He's augmenting his magic with film, which I think is really cool. Yeah. And he was also at that Lumiere premiere in December and offered them 10,000 francs for a cinematograph, and they turned him down. And so he bought a camera from someone else and modified it, or he bought a projector from someone else and then modified it into a camera. Yeah, which is wild.
Well, yeah, because in addition to being a magician, he's kind of an inventor, which definitely lends itself to filmmaking.
Yeah,
especially when no one will sell you a camera.
Yeah, and in just that year, after I think he got the camera built in March or something like that of 1896, and in the remainder of 1896, he shot 80 films, like by himself, which is wild.
Most of which I think are lost.
Yeah,
most of which don't exist anymore.
Only 7 of those still exist right now.
I think we watched all 7 of them.
Yes,
and it is pretty wild to see what an arc they take, sort of how different the ones at the end of the year are from the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I guess that frantic pace of 80 films in 1 year, he's working out a lot of the kinks a lot faster than some of these other people did.
Yeah.
And he is coming up with amazing ways of using the camera by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the early ones are pretty much are very similar to, if not outright remakes of Lumire Brothers actualities.
Yeah.
They're just sort of garden scenes and men playing cards.
Yeah. He had a playing cards one that was a direct remake of one of the 10 Lumiere shorts, and then he did a remake of The Sprinkler Sprinkled, which doesn't exist anymore.
I'm projecting here, but it feels like he saw
that's my job.
I get the sense that Georges Méliès saw the Mary Queen of Scots film and the jump cut in that, and was just blown away by it, and immediately just only wanted to do things with jump cuts. It was just like, that is the coolest thing in the world. I just want to stop the camera and swap stuff out.
And he did some great stuff with it, especially.
Which is it's kind of a magic trick when he first starts doing it. I mean, it's like, I think the first one that I found that had an effect in it was, I believe it is, what is it called?
The Vanishing Lady.
The Vanishing Lady, not to be confused with The Lady Vanishes.
That's already his 70th movie, which he could have done something earlier, but we just don't know about.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch in The Vanishing Lady. So, Vanishing Lady is sort of like just a film of a typical magician stage act of putting a person behind a blanket, having them disappear, and then taking the blanket away. Which on stage would be done through trapdoors or through all different sort of physical effects. But the way old George does it here is he simply turns the camera off, has them walk out, and then turns it back on.
while he's like frozen in place with his hands in the air, holding a cloth.
But just that is not good enough for Georges Méliès, because as any good magician knows, you need the prestige. You can't just make something disappear. You have to bring it back, which he does.
I haven't seen that movie.
Oh man, you gotta check it out. I think
it's good.
That takes place around the same time too.
Oh, neat.
So you could do it as research. But then instead of bringing the lady back, he has a skeleton appear on the bench, which is great fun.
Yeah. More also macabre. I think his movies are quite macabre.
They are. He loves skeletons.
He loves devils.
Yeah. He loves just like very kind of classical Halloween imagery. He loves spooky cobwebs and bats and skeletons.
Yeah. Halloween at the forefront of film technology and narrative advancement in the medium. And
so from there, he just kind of starts going ham on them. Like every film has more and more effects in them and more different ways of incorporating not just things disappearing or reappearing, but sort of teleporting or changing one actor into a different actor. Kind of culminating, I guess, in his great end of the year showstopper.
Yeah, which I think we would both probably put as our number one film of 1896. Sorry to Arrival of the Train.
Yeah, I mean, I think I even put it above Sprinkler Sprinkled. This is probably my favorite.
Oh yeah. Oh no, absolutely.
So far in the 2 weeks that we've done this, this is the one to beat. It's definitely the longest.
Yeah,
it's 3 minutes.
It's 3 minutes. It's extremely long for one of these, and I think all of the films in his catalog are numbered. And this one takes up 3 numbers. So I'm assuming that the numbers actually reference maybe rolls of film, or because I think the reason why they were all these films of this time were under 1 minute was like that was the amount of film that could be put in the camera, probably.
Yeah.
And so This one is, let's see, it's listed as 78 to 80 in his catalog. 3 minutes long, just special effects every moment.
Just an extravaganza.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to begin describing this one. There's too much to say.
It's definitely like the most plot heavy movie that has probably existed up until this point.
Yes,
there's more happening in this than pretty much any other film we've seen. It is, so it's still a static shot, but it is the interior of a spooky castle. A pretty obvious set, but in a way that it doesn't really seem like he's trying to fool anybody. Like, it's very theatrical. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does look like a stage background.
A big cauldron appears, which is just a cutout of a big cauldron. I'm guessing on wood. But I mean,
there's stuff that happens. It's like there is an arc to it, but basically it's 3 minutes of this devil character. Wait, did we say the name of the movie? The movie is House of the Devil, aka the Haunted Castle in Haunted
Castle is the much more boring title.
I wonder if it was changed in America because they're afraid of devil stuff.
Very possible. Would not surprise me. The original French title is, of course, Le Manoir du Diable.
Then this so it's this devil character who is kind of occupying this castle. He transforms into a bat and back again, and this was a year before. People say this is it's kind of contentious on whether this is the first vampire film, because Bram Stoker's Dracula came out a year later.
I feel like he's not explicitly a vampire. He can
I don't think so.
A bat.
Yeah.
And is dressed in a sort of traditional vampire garb. Although, I feel like it didn't actually become traditional vampire garb until after this film.
Probably not. Yeah. It's just lots of general spooky stuff, which...
Yeah. Ghosts, goblins, pitchforks.
Yeah, cauldrons and...
smoke. Witches, maybe?
Yeah. The reason we're describing the movie like this is because there's like... there's not like a specific thing that happens. It's like these invaders kind of come into the castle, and this devil character is playing tricks on them and trying to like scare them away, basically, with all of these conjurations and demonic imagery that he is summoning before them. And so it's just kind of an effects extravaganza.
Yeah. It really it does like it does kind of feel like the equivalent of a big, effects driven blockbuster kind of movie from the now times. This is the equivalent in 1996. And it's very entertaining. I was very entertained by it.
Yeah, it's fun.
There's a bit where one of the sort of invading fellas goes to sit down on a chair, and a skeleton appears on the chair and frightens him.
There's a cool like invisibility cloak kind of effect. There's like the way that a lot of, I want to say spawn in, like a video game term, but like a lot of the way that a lot of these monsters kind of appear in frame is through these puffs of smoke that hide the transition from one jump cut to the next, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it does a good job of it too. Like not all of them immediately read as jump cuts. Like the camera doesn't move. The actors don't really shift much. It's fairly seamless. By this point, he definitely knew what he was doing.
And I don't know. Is there anything else to say about this? It's really cool. It's really good. I just feel like there isn't too much to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely watch it. It's all of these films we've been talking about are free on YouTube.
Yeah, like, I think I should make like a playlist of all of the ones that we talked about.
Yeah, or like have links to it in the show notes, the description, or something.
Yeah.
He did, I think, a couple others in 1896 after the Haunted Castle, or at least on the list I was looking at. They were listed later.
Yeah, I think he did 2 or 3 more.
There's the Terrible Night, I think, is the one immediately after, which is less impressive, but is again a sort of like spooky.
Oh no, a Terrible Night is the 26th one. The 82nd one is A Nightmare, if that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
That, I think that is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And it is pretty, it's kind of more the same, but a little bit less extravagant than.
It's only 1 minute long, and it's just a shot of a guy in his bed who's having a nightmare, and then it makes all of his nightmare visions appear in front of him.
Yeah. Including a moon with a big face on it.
The moon is really cool looking. It's this giant, like freaky looking moon that just kind of like gnashes its teeth above his head. And it's made out of like cardboard or something like that. But it looks pretty good. I
do love to see that Georges Méliès has always loved having like spooky moons in his movies. Like a moon with a face on it is like, it does actually make me curious if that was just a more common image.
That was something that I thought. That was something I thought about a lot of his kind of macabre stuff that we saw, like House of the Devil, is that especially because vampires hadn't been established with a visual language yet. But I mean, visual language wise, a lot of the horror iconography that we still associate with Halloween and just spooky stuff, I was kind of impressed to see how consistent that's been through time. We didn't have so much mass media, quote unquote, that depicted anything. I mean, I guess
ghosts and goblins.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to see how the idea of these spooky things has stayed pretty consistent through the last 130 years or whatever.
Yeah, it's because they're real.
Bram Stoker was just...
I believe in ghosts that are just a person wearing a sheet. And skeletons that appear on your chair.
Another thing about A Nightmare, which is a little less savory, is that like one of the horrific visions that he has is somebody in blackface, which is very of the era. It might be the first blackface that appears. I was trying to figure that out. Like I imagine Edison would have done that at some point, or because that just seems very him, Not
even on film, just doing it with chuckle.
We find out that like many a senator, one of the earliest Edison photos is just a picture of him at a college party in blackface.
Because of all the college parties that Edison went to. It is definitely a reminder of the times.
Yeah. It's not great, but I mean, it goes by pretty quick, and that's why I mentioned Edison, was because all of this stuff was in the vaudeville tradition, and that's where blackface came from.
Yeah. It might not. It's probably not enough to like completely. I don't know. It might be enough to avoid this one. I mean, A Nightmare isn't that impressive compared to a lot of the other Méliès stuff from this year. So if you're looking for one to skip, this is probably a good one.
Similar to that subject, I was looking at an Edison film from this year called A Morning Bath, which is it's an actuality that Edison made that is just a black woman who is bathing her son in a tub. And one of my favorite film critics, Ignaty Vishnevetsky, wrote a review on Letterboxd that I thought was interesting about this. He said, "On its own, a sweet, totally innocent image, a woman laughing as her toddler balls in a wash tub. But one of the interesting things about the early actuality era is how quickly it produced and codified genres. Within a year of the introducing of moviegoing, there were train movies, fire brigade movies, serpentine dance movies, juggling act movies, and, well, movies about black children getting bathed. These were marketed as gag films, very funny and especially pleasing to children, goes one typical catalog description. A morning bath was the Edison Company's entry. Its competitors released such titles as A Colored Boy's Morning Bath and The Pickaninny's Bath and Whitewashing a Colored Baby. And he said, a lot to unpack there, as they say. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I guess comes with the territory of watching these old things, is that we kind of have to grapple with the old politics of them. We're going to get to the jazz singer, and that's all about blackface, isn't it?
Before we get there, we're going to get to some real doozies.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not looking forward to watching.
How could I forget
some of them? Yeah. Well, we'll get there. We'll have to unpack more of that once we get. That's not till 1905 or something.
Yeah. 1915, if that's the one that you're thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about on these films?
I do think I hadn't thought about genres quite like that before. I think it's funny that he points out serpentine dance movies, because there are a lot of those.
Yeah, they all kind of. It's hard to tell the difference between all of them, but everybody. The remakes were a big thing at this time. Everybody was remaking each other's films and remaking their own films multiple times in a year. I think actually 2 of those versions of Workers Leaving a Lumiere Factory were shot in 1896. They were people. Yeah. So it seemed like there was no sense of like, I own this film idea. It's like everybody's just making their own versions of each other's films.
Yeah, it almost kind of feels a bit more like paintings or photographs. Like they tend to get copied and sort of repurposed. And there are 1,000 Renaissance paintings that are almost the same. They're just different painters sort of changing faces or color palettes or things. And it seems like that is kind of the attitude with these early films. They're just sort of like, oh, a train coming into a station. Let's do one of those.
We got to get those train movies.
Yeah. People are eating up those train movies. And it also is interesting that I feel like a common complaint that critics make every year is that the only thing coming out are remakes or sequels. And that literally goes back to the birth of film.
Yeah.
It is nothing but remakes and sequels. Maybe less so sequels, but
yeah, a lot of these things were viewed pretty individually, and so there wasn't any kind of you couldn't trust that one person was going to watch the next movie in a series or something like that. I get the impression that they were also somewhat hard to access. There weren't movie theaters everywhere. This was the year that movie theaters were beginning to be built. In the US, they were called Vitascope halls and Edisonia halls. But I can't imagine they were very commonplace yet.
Vitascope hall seems, I don't know, something about that sounds clinical and creepy to me. It sounds like an old-timey dentistry office more than anything else.
Yeah, it could be like something from BioShock or something like that.
Yeah, that also that seems right.
And I guess there's something a little. I guess one other thing that we could talk about is the sort of unsavory element that was considered about a lot of these films. There was The Kiss, which is an Edison film.
Although, it was sort of Edison produced, but it was directed by William Hasey. I'm not entirely sure how to Hess. It's probably Hess.
Yeah.
And it's pretty significant. It's the first kiss on film, it's been a lot of those since. And then it could then kind of be inferred that it's the first romance.
Yeah, and apparently it was pretty edgy for the time. I was reading it's public kissing was greatly frowned upon by Victorian society, and
Boy.
so like people were not too pleased about this. That's what I was saying is like, it's odd that Edison is sort of at the forefront of scientific achievement and at the time, but was also like just this showman huckster who was interested in circus sideshows and things that society didn't really want you to see. The W.K.L. Dixon, who worked with Edison in the beginning and at this point had left the Edison company, created the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company. And Mutoscopes, so the thing that I was talking about last week, the hand crank thing with the pictures that flop by instead of the kind of film strip, that I think was a Mutoscope that I was talking about. And so it's a cheaper version, a cheaper kind of film object that you could look at. There was still a podium that you looked into. And apparently it was pretty common for Mutoscopes to have basically porn films inside them or just like sequences of images to that extent.
Well, 1896 is also the premiere of Le Coucher de la Mariée, which is the first Torny film, or is, according to Wikipedia anyway, the first erotic film. Which seems like a bit of a stretch watching it now. Like I can understand why it would be this sort of like cheeky sort of thing in 1896, but it's a woman just taking off about 25 layers of clothing, and then by the end of it is still fully clothed.
But by Victorian standards,
Victorian times, that was like, oof, boy, steam up the screen.
Yeah, I read this was talking about Mutoscopes in particular, but a San Francisco Call quote, a newspaper that was talking about the Mutoscopes and similar things like that. A new instrument has been placed in the hands of the vicious for the corruption of youth. These vicious exhibitions are displayed in San Francisco with an effrontery that is as audacious as it is shameless.
Wow.
Yeah.
Strong words.
And then in 1899, there was another paper in England that was talking about vicious, demoralizing picture shows in the penny and the slot machines. It's hardly possible to exaggerate the corruption of the youth that comes from exhibiting under a strong light nude female figures represented as living and moving, going into and out of baths, sitting as artist models, etc.
Dancing serpentinely.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. So it's interesting that this stuff was being ostracized in that way already.
Yeah. Just another sort of aspect that is so associated with film, sort of like people being outraged by it and sort of viewing it as kind of as dangerous or sort of corrupting of the youth. It's like it right away that happened. Like,
yeah, I mean,
right from the get-go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, same thing with video games in the 80s and 90s and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
comic books. Yeah.
All the cool stuff immediately gets thrown under the bus. This year, 1896, was also the premiere of what is it? The Cabbage Baby.
Oh yeah, lest we just like just like most of the film world, forgetting about women. Oops.
Yeah, 1896 was the premiere of The Fairy of the Cabbages, which is now a lost film, but is significant in that it is the first known film to be directed by a woman.
Yeah, and apparently she was the only woman directing films for the next decade until 1906.
Alice Guy Blanche.
Yeah.
Blanchet?
And another version of that movie is available online because like the time, she shot 2 remakes of her own movie in 1900 and 1902.
Yeah. Couldn't get it any better. And I as far as I can tell, the 1900 one, which is the one that I watched, differs, I mean, somewhat significantly from the original.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. But
the main idea of it is a fairy that's plucking newborn babies out of cabbages, as in a Cabbage Patch Kid kind of sense.
Yeah, I did not realize that children and cabbage were so inexorably linked this early.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's some kind of historical legend thing or whatever, that baby girls come out of roses and baby boys come out of cabbages. Okay, so that's what this movie was depicting.
But yeah, I mean, the 1900 one is cool. It's very like it is very kind of theatrical, but it has it has a cool look to it. What other, like there was another boxing kangaroo movie. I mean, yeah, most of the like significant stuff I feel like we've talked about. I don't know if there's any other cool things that either of us saw.
Nope.
All right then. All right, so I guess teaser for next week. There's going to be more movies.
Oh yeah, and I wanted to put a couple quick notes at the end. Is that I was talking about Edison's film studio that he made in New Jersey last week, and it is called Black Maria. Is the name of the film studio?
Is it Maria or Mariah? As in like the...
I don't know. It's spelled like Maria.
I think it might be pronounced Maria, but I could be wrong on that.
Huh. Yeah, it was a purpose-built studio, the very first one, and that black background was this tar paper that he had around the walls to just form a simple background, and it had a retractable roof, which you might have mentioned.
Yeah.
And then also, last week I said in response in a joking fashion, don't fact check me, but do fact check me, because the whole point of this is to learn.
Yes. Quick fact check on my part. I'm pretty sure last week that I said that the Museum of the Moving Image was in Brooklyn. It is in Queens. And I should know that.
I forgot to say that,
yeah. So I am ashamed and appalled, but I'm now taking the time to...
Turn in your podcasting card.
I've had it for such a short amount of time.
I'll get a new co-host next week. But I guess that's it for 1896. On to 1897.
Tune in next week. Same time, same place.
Yeah. And if you all have any more recommendations, feel free to message us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I still haven't figured out any, kind of email address or whatever. But we got like Twitters and stuff that I haven't done anything with yet. We'll see.
Tweet at us.
Tweet at us at 1 week, 1 year, all spelled out, with the non-numerals.
I'm sure we will not live to regret that statement.
Maybe I should get both versions if possible. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. I have this Kino. Oh my gosh! I just knocked over my dang Red Bull.
Oh no!